Hi and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I want to look at the first of three different ways to go about composing from using harmony as the basis. So when you're starting to write anything new, it could be, the source of inspiration could be a melodic idea, it could be some rhythmic idea, it could be a sound, it could be a chord sequence. And so this is what we're going to look at today, is how you can go about starting to formulate an idea by looking at chord sequences. Now, unless you have a theoretical knowledge of how harmony works, it sometimes can be a bit confusing to try and figure out what chord would naturally follow the next one, or what sets of chords naturally work well together. And this is probably the reason why, I don't know if you're like me, you get a bundle of adverts for these MIDI chord packs. They tend to come up a lot on YouTube videos that I watch. They're increasingly popular because they take that kind of guesswork out of the equation by giving you chords that work well together, or chord sequences that work well together. So what I thought I'd do is give you the fundamentals to try and start working that out yourself. So the first method we're going to use is using what we call diatonic chords. So diatonic chords are literally a set of chords that work really, really well together, as a short, brief description of what they are. So to do this, we're going to start off with taking a diatonic scale. One of the diatonic scales we have available is the major scale. So we're going to use this, and we'll use the C major scale just to keep things simple. It helps if I choose a pen. Let's try again. Okay, so C, D, E, F, G, A, and B are the 7 notes of the scale. Obviously, we finish off by going back to C, but that's just a repeated note, so let's leave that out for the moment. So the easiest way to find your diatonic chords is literally, because C major is all the white keys on the piano, we can follow a very simple pattern. So if I play C on the piano, if I play the note that's a third higher, this is the E, and if I play the note that's a third higher again, I end up with the G. And you'll see that pattern of play a note, skip a note, play a note, skip a note, play a note, ignoring the black keys, just using the white keys. So there's my first chord, or my first triad, diatonic triad, that I've built off of the note C. And the notes there are C, E, and G. And we can see that pattern if we have a look at the scale. We've started off with this C, and then we've gone a third higher to E, and a third higher again to G. And that's the pattern that we're going to use for all of these triads. So if we start at F, we're going to skip to A, and then we're going to skip to the next note, which would be obviously one past this B, would take us back to the C, so to speak. Okay, so let's take all that out of the way and look at building this up. So for my C chord, as I say, I'm just adding the notes E and G above, and then I do the same thing for the next. So for D, I'd end up with D, F, A. For E, I'd end up with E, G, B. For F, F, A, C. For G, G, B, D. For A, C, E. And for B, B, D, F. Okay, so let's have a look at what these chords are called. We won't get into the reasoning for why things are major, minor, or diminished. We're just going to bypass that for the moment and just have a look at what these are. So our first chord here, the chord on the 1, is our C chord. The chord at the 4th step is our F chord, and the chord at the 5th step is our G chord, and they're all major chords. The chord at the 2nd step is D minor. At the 3rd step is E minor, and at the 6th step is A minor. At the 7th step, we have B diminished, written like that, B with a little circle. We can then also use a process of Roman numerals. So I'm just going to shift this up a little bit so we can work underneath. We could do something like this. We could have an uppercase Roman numeral 1 for the first chord, an uppercase Roman numeral 4 for the 4 chord, and a 5 for the 5 chord. I'm pretty sure the Romans didn't have lowercase Roman numerals, but in harmony we used them to indicate the difference between major, minor, and diminished chords. So you'll see our major chords have got an uppercase Roman numeral symbol, our minor chords have got a lowercase, and our diminished is the lowercase with the little circle at the end to denote diminished. So let's shuffle all of that up now, so we're just looking at those chords. So we know what they are, we've talked about them. There's C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and we can go back to C. So what if I told you can stick those chords in any order and it will kind of sound musical? And this is true, you can pretty much pick any one. I'm going to disregard the 7th chord just for the moment. We'll come back to why in a second, but we're going to pick 4 chords at random between 1 and 6. So I'm just going to very quickly pick out, let's say 3, Let's do a 5 chord next. What about a 2 chord? And let's go back to the 1 chord at the end. So as I said, I haven't thought about this at all. I've just picked out 4 chords at random. So we end up with E minor, G major, D minor, and C major. So all I've done there is just picked out the chords from that scale. Okay, let's have a listen to it. I'm just going to play it in root position. No sort of piano-ish interpretation of it. Literally just what those root chords sound like. So here's my E minor. Let's play that again without the extra note. There's the E minor to a G, to a D minor, to my C. Okay, now I'm going to sort of change the ordering of the notes around a little bit. Still going to play the same chords, but just to pianify it a little bit. Straight away you can hear, it may not be the nicest chord progression in the world, but you can hear that it's pretty musical. It kind of works. It's really, really hard to play a wrong chord or make a mistake with this. Let's use another example. So this time, to just kind of establish our key sensor, I'm going to start with the 1 chord this time. Then I'm going to go to the 6 chord. Then I'm going to go to the, let's go 5. And let's finish with a 3. So in this case, we've got C major, A minor, G major, and E minor. Okay, let's have a listen to that, just in root position. And now if I again piano it a little bit. And again, you can see it sounds quite musical. Now, some chord progressions will sound better than others, but as I say, you can literally pick 4 chords at random. Well, it doesn't have to be 4, it could be any number. But the simple fact of the matter is they're going to sound like they kind of go together because they are related chords. They're related through this membership of the key of C major, so to speak. So what about the diminished chord? We talked about that before, the 7 chord. The funny thing about the diminished chord is it's a little bit odd to deal with. And the reason for that is kind of got to do with the way notes move between chords. We call that concept voice leading, and I've got a video which looks at voice leading, which I'll link in the description. But the idea is basically, if I was to take like a C chord, for example, here's my C, E, G. So let's look at this very briefly, just as an example of why the diminished is a bit funky. So here's my C, E, G, and let's say I want to go to my F chord, which is F, A, and C. So if I'm playing C, E, G, the easiest way for me to get to an F chord here, let's look at the notes in common. Well, the C is common, so let's keep that note, and then let's just look at moving the E and the G to F and A. So if these two, E and G, just move up 1 step, we get to F and A, and there's my F chord. So C chord to the F chord. And you can see the only 2 notes that move are those top 2, and they move very smoothly. Now the thing about a diminished chord, here's my B diminished. The outside 2 notes of this is what we call a tritone, and it sounds a bit harsh by itself. One of the things about the tritone is it wants to resolve one of 2 ways. It either wants to resolve by semitone outwards, so for example my B would become a B flat and my F would become an F sharp or G flat. And you can hear that harsh interval resolves quite nicely to this. Or we can go the other way, we can resolve inwards. So the B and the F resolving into C and E. Now, the funny thing about that's a very classical approach to sort of how you would resolve or how you would voice lead away from a tritone. And it's very common if you learn sort of standard 4-part harmony style at secondary school level, for example. That's one of the things you'll often be told about how to deal with the tritone. Resolve it outwards or resolve it inwards. So in a more contemporary or pop setting, it's not that we ignore those kind of rules, it's just that we're not trying to deal with that so much in how we would do classical voice leading. So if we were to come up with a random chord progression that included that diminished chord, let's do one. So again, these are going to be totally random, but I'm just going to make sure I put the 7 in there somewhere. So let's go 3 to 7 to 5 to 1, for example. So I'd end up with this. And it's kind of a little bit odd in the middle there. So what you can do with a diminished chord to make it a little bit simpler to deal with in this kind of framework is substitute it for a 5 chord, but with the 7th note as its bass note. So what we say here is we have a 5 over 7. So what does this sound like? Well, in our case here, it's a G chord with a B note as the bass note. Another way of thinking about that is a G in first inversion. But again, let's skip away from that conversation for the moment. So here's my G chord, and I'm playing G octaves down the bottom here. Now I'm going to move that so that I'm playing the B as the octave. So there you can see it's not exactly my B diminished chord because I'm not playing the F. But it's very close. So there's my G over B, and here's my B diminished. B diminished, G over B. They're not a million miles away from each other, and we have this root note B still there. So let's do the same thing in this progression. What we're going to do is we're going to change this now to be a 5 over 7. So this means we end up with E minor, G over B, G, and C. Let's try that. So here's in root position. Now that's got a little bit more of a smoother movement. So I'll play both of them. First of all, here's the original with a diminished chord. Let's try that again. Just a bit lumpy in the middle. Now we're incorporating the 5 over the 7, the G over B. And again, if I piano it a little bit, all of a sudden that diminished chord, which is no longer obviously a diminished chord, sort of fits into it. So obviously it doesn't matter which key you're in. All we need to do is just make sure that we adhere to the same rules that we use there, just building our diatonic triads. Okay, thanks very much for watching. I hope that's been useful. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Liking the video really helps out with the algorithm, so make sure you click that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's also a link to a Discord community at the bottom. This is very early stages. It's very quiet there. We've had a couple of people in and out asking some questions and so forth, and it's been great to interact with some of the viewers outside of just the comments section in YouTube. But feel free, as I say, like and share the video, leave comments, join that Discord community. It's very elite at the moment. There's only a few of us, but hopefully we'll grow over time. In the next video, I'm going to come back and look at another method of writing chords from, writing tunes from chord progressions, and that is to look at the concept of borrowed chords. And borrowed chords just means we can just expand our palette a little bit more and take some slightly more interesting journeys between chords. Until then, enjoy your music and see you in the next one.